Every life has a soundtrack. Join me as we invite guests to share their journey through music, one song at a time. 10 moments, 10 memories. I'm your host, Sean, and welcome to 10 Tracks.
Are you ready?
Welcome to 10 Tracks. My guest today is Tigrilla Gardenia. She is a nature-inspired mentor and certified life coach, empowers multi-passionate alternative thinkers to harness their brilliance and overcome self-doubt through deep collaboration with the plant world. Hi, Tigrilla. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. Where are you in the world?
I am in a place that I lovingly called Oz. No, it's called Domenher. It's one of the largest spiritual communities in the world, and so I'm in northern Italy. That's where we are, at the foothills of the Alps.
And how many people are in this spiritual community?
Oh, sorry, you have to ask it again because unfortunately I didn't hear it. Yeah.
How many people are in the spiritual community?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we call this the first city, which is where I am right now. And in the first city, there's about 500 people, which includes initiates. We live in shared homes. So initiates living in our multiple shared homes, and children, and even just a few friends of the community that live around here. And then around the world, there's probably around another, I think the last count I heard was another 800 or 900. I mean, yeah, we're getting up there in numbers.
So if we look at because I'm a big fan, especially with Italian food and everything like that. This would probably be more of a multicultural food community, right? Because it's not just Italian, or is it still very Italian centric?
I would so love to be able to say that the answer to that question is yes, but unfortunately, as you know, there are some European roots in particular that are so freaking strong that it's hard to break it. And Italians are so convinced of their food. So, unfortunately, for some of us who have more eclectic taste, like myself, no, it's mainly I mean, we do have, it's very multicultural nowadays. I would say the last count I did, we were trying to understand in the first city. So living here, we're probably like 70% Italian, and then the rest is all mixed: Japanese, German, Dutch, like Croatian, all kinds of stuff. In the world, it's really different. Obviously, the other people that are living all around the world, we have communities in the Netherlands, in Norway, in Croatia, in Japan, and plus some others, but we have like some big contingencies. But here, man, Italian food, stronghold, like stronghold.
Well, maybe we need to see if Stanley Tucci's listening to get him over there, and he can crack this open and kind of expand into more than just Italian for you.
Yeah, I'm all excited because a friend of mine said to me, "Hey, Saturday night I'm cooking," because in our shared homes you have turns, and so it's her turn Sunday, excuse me, to cook. And she was like, "I'm gonna make a paella." I'm like, "I'm so there," because she's Spanish. I'm like, so there. And when I used to cook Thanksgiving, or I used to make like Cuban lechon or something like that, and they would be like, and so they were like, but they can only do it in small doses. Like the rest of the food has to be, and we're Piemontese, so it's like the good thing is we have a lot of good wine. Like can't complain about the wine at all. So it's like kind of balances it out. I'm like, oh well, at least when I'm talking about Piemontese, I get the wine, and so yeah, that's all good.
And I have to sneak across the border to get the Italian, especially Piemonte wine, because the French obviously are only promoting mostly. I think you can find a few Italian wines here, but they're not as abundant as you can when you go to Italy.
Yeah.
And Piemonte is my favorite, by the way.
Yeah. Because when it comes to wine, I was like, of course, I understand why it's your favorite. It took me a while because I wasn't a wine person when I arrived, and now all of a sudden I'm like, I'm the snob. So people when they ask me, would you like a glass of wine? I'm like, what is it? Tell me what it is, and I will give you an answer.
So 25 years you have experience working in arts, technology, communication. You've worked in, I guess, big tech
Hmm.
for Microsoft. Then you moved to working in a more, I don't know, this is, I guess, professional circus, not, what most people consider the word circus. This is something like more of Cirque du Soleil or something
Yeah.
more high tech.
I did it both, to be honest. I had a small, like I was the co-owner of a small circus. So the typical thing that we think about, of the carnies going crazy, and then moved into Cirque du Soleil, which was quite fun. It was very much a different experience between the two, especially because my carny type circus had everything from the traditional arts that we expect, acrobatics and aerials
Mhm.
and all that, and clowning and stuff. And then we had a little bit of the dark arts where we had other things, which I won't go into right now. But so it was a really beautiful mix. And then to go to Cirque du Soleil was like, okay, this is different.
Yeah. And then but working in obviously tech for Microsoft, that was obviously more the corporate side of things. And this is when you were in the States.
Yeah, yeah. I basically so I graduated from college and had like multiple little jobs all relating to because I was a music engineer and an electrical engineer. That was my major. And so I was in this world of audio and I was working at a CD pressing plant. I was doing commercials for a major department store, which unfortunately no longer exists in South Florida, which is Burdines. And I was doing a lot of live sound or working in so I did like some management stuff and I did merchandising and I did for some of the bands in the area of the time, especially one in particular. And so I got this, I first was able to stay in that audio world and moved to Seattle to stay in the world of audio and music with Real Networks, which at the time was called progressive networks. They weren't even called real networks at the time that I first started. We lived through the light name change. And most people don't know real networks today, but real networks was really the founders of audio online. I mean, real audio 3.0 was like the birth of, oh my goodness, there's going to be streaming audio coming through. So when I watch video like YouTube, I mean, we founded it with Real Video 4.0 was like the birth of streaming video. And so
Yeah.
it was the tech boom, like everything was blowing up. It was this big bubble and companies were weird. We were playing with Nerf ball, like Nerf fights and like having fun and yet go, go, go because you had to launch. Everybody was trying. It was the world of Napster and all these other kind of what's going to be legal, what's going to be illegal, and Real Networks did the legal side. So it was like really interesting that we were in that. And then for a variety of different reasons and reorgs and relationships and all these types of stuff, I ended up going to Microsoft, where at first I was kind of like trying to get my bearings because I had come out of that audio world and that music and that part. And I had kind of, and at the time I was of it, I was even doing a side project. I was acting and in musicals and on stage and stuff. That was my sanity outside of the out of the world. And so I went to work eventually for Windows like central project management. So here's like the big kahuna, thousands and thousands of people working on this. And it was amazing because I remember sitting in, we used to do this meeting every day at like 10 a.m. It was called Windows War, horrible name, but it was the meeting where you kind of decided what was inside of the product and what was outside of the project. So it was like all the release managers of every major, product.
Mhm.
I remember sitting around and looking at that room and saying, holy crap, we make decisions for millions of people in the world. We hear like from from people who are working in like major tech companies to people who are just trying to get their school project done. We're making decisions that affect. It was very humbling, you can say, very, very humbling.
And I thought, did Windows or Microsoft try to create a streaming service initially?
They did. As a matter of fact, I have the media player like open right now because I was listening to some tracks and which is not what I normally use, but I just happen to have it open. And yeah, they did. They tried to create a streaming service. I unfortunately, because I had come out of Real Networks and I had a non-compete clause, I wasn't able to go into that team. So I kind of laterally worked with the team through the Windows piece, which was really interesting. And there was stuff
Mhm.
about it that was good. There was a lot of stuff about it that were not good, especially coming out of a company that was dedicated to that. So
Mhm.
where, everybody was not just an amazing coder or somebody who really knew tech, but somebody who really loved music. I mean, our parties at Real Networks were infamous because, of course, it's a bunch of creatives all in the room making a
Yeah.
crap load of money in that time. So wild.
So your music you've picked for your 10 tracks, as now this is some that are traditional, and
Yeah.
then we also, as we briefly mentioned, the plant world, and a big area for you is plant music.
Hmm.
So this is exciting because I'm really keen to learn more about this, and I love the idea. And I know you shared a little bit with me already, but but the vibrations that plants make and how you can take that frequency. And I guess insects already hone in on that. They have a way to hear what plants and how to connect with them. But I guess humans don't really have that way to connect without using technology now.
Yeah, there's kind of two parts to it, and there's an entire field that is just being born right now called bioacoustics, and it's really looking at especially phytoacoustics. What does that actually mean? And there's two forms. There's like the kind of more biological side, which is that plants do literally make a sound. Like if you took a microphone and you put it close to certain parts of the plants, you would hear some clicking, you would hear some other pieces. And plants are also have an entire electrical system. So there is kind of vibration that comes from that. So there's one part that is the biological, absolutely core, which we're only starting to hear now because microphones are getting sensitive enough. So that's how we're
Mhm.
discovering things like, for example, plants can hear. So plants can change the chemicals that they send to certain areas when they hear the sound of caterpillars that are eating at the leaves. And also, plants make these clicking sounds that they're trying to understand. Are they messages to other plants? Are they messages, like you said, to the insects? And then there's other electrical signals that are picked up, as you mentioned, from plants relating to, oh, there's a bee coming near. Let me call this bee closer and things like that. And then there's the other side, which is kind of the music of the plants, which is a device that the community, my community started to work on in the late 1970s, believe it or not. We
Wow.
were trying to understand, how could we get into the mind of a plant? This is really early on when nobody is talking very loudly. I mean, yeah, sure, The Secret Life of Plants came out, but in northern Italy, they didn't really know it very well. And it was largely discredited when that book came out in the 1960s and 70s. So this was about, okay, what if we were to take the electrical response of a plant, in other words, the impedance or difference between the leaf and the root system and the ground. And if we were to listen to, what if we could listen to that and using MIDI, turn it into notes of music, what would happen? And our idea originally was maybe this will give us insight into what the plant is experiencing. I mean, we really thought it would be a one-way kind of conversation in the sense that, I mean, a one-way transmission. The plants would be doing this and humans would be listening. The thing is that, as you know, if you put a musician near music, they will eventually try to make music with it. And so people started to like try to play along to this music. And what they noticed was that plants that had been playing for a long time actually started to change their music based on what they were hearing. And that was like a revelation that there was a two-way conversation because it wasn't really until 2006, and this is happening in the 1980s and the 1990s. It wasn't until about 2006 that science started to catch up to the fact that plants are actually intelligent. And the first of what's called plant neurobiology, which is still a controversial topic, or plant signaling and behavior starts to come out. And so we don't have this information. It's really much more I want to call it spiritual or guided, like personal intuition. And we started to do concerts and we started to develop this device. And eventually, in the 2000s, we were able to create a device that we could actually like sell to market because we didn't want it to be, yeah, we had done demonstrations and things here in Damanhur, but we wanted this to be something people had and could start to connect because we believe that it's very important for us to reconnect with the natural world and to feel ourselves as beings of nature and to enter back into that relationship. And this device gave an opportunity for that. And, musicians, they take something and they're going to run with it. And so
Yeah.
we've created some pretty fun stuff thanks to that device.
And it's great if we can, get this more widely shared, so people make more awareness of this, but understand this is a new level of music,
Mhm.
which to but let's get started with your first track. This is a little bit maybe pre the plant with these guys. This
I
is
did
Iron
not put
Maiden.
these in any order. I just put them
Okay.
in the order that they spilled out of my head.
Don't worry, we're gonna probably go with that order. So this is "Wasted Years" by Iron Maiden.
So you have to understand, Iron Maiden is my I know I don't look it. Most people never assume it. It is my number one favorite band in the entire world. Only a few months ago, I was finally able to see them live in concert in what would be probably one of their last tours because the band was born around the time of my birth. So
Hmm.
we're about the same age as a band. And I grew up really, I mean, completely in love with this band, with the music, with the magic of it, the esoteric nature, the lyricism, the music, the harmony, everything about it, the cohesion of the band, which after all these years you still see on stage that there is no one person, there is no lead. Yeah, sure, okay, you might know one or two names more than the other, but it has always been a group which you don't see as much nowadays. And
Right.
so therefore this song, which was probably kind of like my gateway drug, even though there was, I mean, I had lived, I can't explain it. It has been such an influential piece of my life, so much so that when I left remember I said I was acting and like singing. At one point, I went to an audition. I was still working at Microsoft, and I went to an audition and I walked in, and there was a person that I had worked with at Real Networks. He was the director of this like concert, of this performance that they were doing. And it was a very unusual performance. I later learned was like a performance inside of like a dance rave type party and had all this symbolism around it. And he looked at me and he was like, okay, I know what I'm going to make you sing. And I was like, I mean, I had prepared what I was going to audition. He's like, no, I want you to sing Wasted Years a cappella. I was like, all right, let's do it. And that's what I sung for him, a cappella, like Wasted Years. And he cast me. And that event ended up cascading to what got me out of Microsoft and finally got me to change parts of my life that had been going very like solid in a very normal trajectory, like get the good job, get the husband, get the house. Like I was
Right.
going down that route. And that song cast me in this show. And this show showed me a completely different way of living. And it was probably about 6 months later that I ended up leaving Microsoft, left the husband, left it all, and
Wow.
completely changed my life. So that's why it's number one.
But it's also, you grew up in southern
South
Florida,
Florida. Yeah.
right? Towards close to Miami,
Uh,
Cuban roots.
yep.
So not that that's the only kind of mutual music or culture that should be in your DNA, but Iron Maiden is pretty far from the spectrum.
But it's the 1980s, right? It's the
Yeah.
80s. It's hair metal. It is Miami, so it is hair metal and such.
Okay.
So yeah, I could have added, like Motley Crue and all these, but I have always been kind of unconventional, like always been sort of whatever the norm is, I'm slightly off to one side. Not
Right.
because I choose to be, it just happens to be that way. And so I remember my brothers, I have older brothers, and they came home from the concert in 1984 because I still have the program, and they brought the program. By this point, I was too young to go, to a concert. I mean, I was 10 years old-ish. And I just looked at this like a picture of Eddie, which is the main mascot for Iron Maiden, and it was like, and I was listening to all this music. I don't know. I was in love with it. I've always, as a matter of fact, even here, I have one friend of mine who's very much into heavy metal, and
Hmm.
I'm the one that goes to all the concerts with him. So I've seen more concerts in the last few years thanks to him, because he'll call me and he'll be like, you want to go to a concert this date? And I'll be like, yes. He's like, I haven't told you who's playing. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I just want to
Yeah.
go and have it. There's something about the rawness of it. And like I said, for Iron Maiden probably opened up the esoteric part of me, especially around the album right after that, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, that really went into, Aleister Crowley and everything kind of like esoteric magic type stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was that. I'm hooked.
I
Totally.
have a friend that this might have been in the 90s or late 90s that he actually knows or has met the singer
Bruce Dickinson.
Bruce Dickinson, because he's a pilot and Bruce Dickinson the pilot, so
Hmm.
they've met over piloting.
Yeah,
I don't know more.
piloty
Just
stuff.
yeah, exactly. And so that he just kind of shared with me how he knew him and stuff, but it was mostly they were geeking out over airplanes and all that because they were pilots. But
Yeah. Yeah,
we get to
that's what it is. That's what I love about them. Like they're just real. As a matter of fact, the drummer now, the only one of the group that's retired, the drummer,
Mhm.
he has a restaurant in Coral Springs, which is Broward County. It's the next county up from Miami. So it's like, and it's called Rock and Roll Ribs. And I love going there, one, because of the food, because I'm a foodie, and then two, because it's all Iron Maiden paraphernalia. I was like, I love this place.
How many times have you seen him live?
I've actually only seen them live twice, like this last time and then one time when I was younger, and that was it. I haven't been able to see them all that often, notwithstanding the fact that I was part of the Iron Maiden fan club, still have my book
Ooh,
with like
okay.
all of my stuff, and had a huge, in a time when parents didn't understand crap about this. My parents, Iron Maiden's always had these beautiful flags, like they've taken their album covers and turned them into a flag rather than a poster. And I remember I was one of them for me. So it was Derek Riggs, which is the original artist for Iron Maiden. My first tattoo is connected to Iron Maiden. That's how much I love them. But like
Yeah.
he's again an esoteric, and he's a Kabbalist. So I teach Kabbalah now. But for the longest time, I was looking to understand why I kept wanting a tattoo. Most of my tattoos are very ritually connected to me, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't design one. It just wouldn't come out. And then I'm reading an article about Derek Riggs, and he's talking about the actual like main symbol of Iron Maiden, which I have tattooed amongst other things on me. And he was explaining the Kabbalistic origin of it. I was like, oh my God, I've had a Kabbalistic tattoo since I was 18. No wonder I can't design a new one because I already have it. And it was like,
Yeah.
oh, it was perfect.
We get to track two.
Mm,
This is a little bit more recent, still in the heavy zone. Linkin Park.
yeah.
This is quite a big song from them called Numb.
Mm. Yeah. So I added this because when you had talked to me about 10 tracks, being somebody who's been in music for so long, of course, I can name 1,001 tracks that I
Yeah.
like. But I wanted tracks that really meant something to me, or that they helped me through periods of my life. And Numb has always been a song, from the first time I've heard it, besides the actual music, which is almost more important to me than the lyrics most of the time. I am very much a physical person. Like I listen to music somatically through my body, and so it's impossible for me not to really move. Like when I go to first time I went to a concert here in Italy, I was yelled at the entire concert because I was standing up. It was the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I was up at the top, like up in the upper section, and my friend kept looking at me going, sit down. And I was like, I am not sitting down at a concert. They were like, here we sit. I was like, I am not sitting. From now on, I always get like seats down at the on the floor or something because
Yeah.
it's impossible for me to sit down during a concert. And this has always had from both the rhythm and the actual music something that whenever I'm feeling it like gets my angst out, it moves
Yeah.
me something out of me. And then because of the lyrics, the idea of like having, I've always been a multi-potentialite, like multi-passionate person, very off the cuff, haven't really followed any one kind of linear line. And it took me a very long time to understand who I was. And this is a kind of song that helps me remember that, like how easy it is to go numb and try to like follow in somebody else's footsteps, and how
Right.
important it is to not do that. And so whenever I'm having like a really bad day, it's the thing that I can sing at the top of my lungs and just like get it all out of my body and say, if I let it sit there, this is who I become. I become numb. And so,
Right.
yeah, so it was like, yeah, you got to got that. You got to add that.
Yeah, it's a great song. I think the whole track itself has a great vibe. And then I really like I've heard the remix with Jay-Z, which is
Mm,
actually pretty cool how they mix encore and together. So that's kind of a good and mixing the two genres as well, which I find good.
yeah. Yeah, like it was it's definitely one of those that I still like play. Like I look for it when I have those moments. I'm like, I need that song right now.
We get to track 3. This is Yanni, Santorini.
Another like, I'm laughing because I went back, like I said, back through like I almost picked a song per decade of my life, or two songs per decade type of thing. So Yanni was around the time probably where, remember I told you I'm a little bit weird. So here I am listening to like heavy metal and glam metal, and at the same time Yanni was my study music. And the reason for this is because I can't study with lyrics.
Hmm.
I'm very verbal. I'm clairaudient, so I hear a lot of stuff through my like speaking. And so when I study, when most people can like listen to music to concentrate, I cannot have anything with lyrics at all. So not just studying, but like doing any kind of work or any kind of thing. And I have no idea where I discovered Yanni from, but his entire, I remember I had the CDs, and like the entire kind of like his whole collection at the time became my anthem music to a certain study. And even when I first even remember moving to Seattle and I was starting to digitize things because I had everything. Like I listened to all of the Yanni and Santorini. I was going back as I was making this list for you, and I went back to listen to it, and it was like dun 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 dun, and it was like this live album too. So it was just so epically large. Plus, I don't know if you ever like knew Yanni. Yanni was,
Hmm.
he had this big mustache and this black hair, and he was like a personality with all these keyboards around him, and he would stand there, this Greek man who was probably very tiny, but he seemed huge.
Yeah.
And it was just, it's inspirational to me. That rhythm of the way he makes his music is like an entire journey in and of itself, and very inspiring. And it would just focus me. It was my way of focusing and feeling very, what's the right word? Triumphant. I don't know. It just, especially that song, it just makes you feel like everything is possible. And so that was it. That was why I loved listening to that song. Oh, I must have listened to that song thousands of times.
And I remember working in a record store in the late 80s, and people would come in and ask for Yanni, and obviously he was huge. And whereas somebody like Jean-Michel Jarre, who I heard of later on, and who is obviously massive as well, but it seemed to me like more people were very, maybe it was because Yanni was more accessible, or there was a link to this kind of new sort of sound that had kind of really kicking off in the 80s that people were resonating with. It's not really new age, but
No, it's the tip right before New Age. Like it
yeah.
could easily be accepted by the New Age crowd, but it's not New Age. And I think I don't remember who he was married to, but besides the fact of him being a big personality, his wife, which I forgot to look up again, was somebody very famous. Like,
Hmm.
so although they never were kind of seen together, it wasn't because of that, but you could tell that there was like this aura. He was just a bigger than life person. He is bigger than life personality, and I think that his music kind of it always represented that. I always felt big. Like I
Yeah.
just it felt big, like big.
Yeah.
So
And you
that's
see
why.
some of his concerts that are like massive, like crowds of people in 10,000 plus arenas that he would do and
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
keyboards.
Exactly. With key and that was the other part. I mean, there's no lyrics, which I think in these periods of times, like you were talking about the 80s and the 90s, I mean, what is popular is mostly lyrical, like something that has lyrics, which we're going to get into in the next song, but it's like something that has lyrics that you bite into those lyrics and you
Hmm.
hold on to those lyrics. And his had no lyrics. And it was
Right.
keyboards and you're just like not even a guitarist like type of thing. It's a completely different type of virtuoso, and he used to love to play with orchestras, so you had this huge sound to it. And I guess that that was probably why I just put, and I felt it was weird, it was like this secret love, like I felt old. Like I felt like this must be something older people were listening to because nobody my
Yeah.
age knew who the hell he was. That's why I said I don't even remember how I had it, but I do remember all the CDs. Like I remember the covers and I remember him, everything about
Yeah.
it.
You mentioned earlier Kabbalism. So
Yep.
can you tell me a little bit more about that and explain maybe?
Yeah. So Kabbalah, for most people, they think about it either in relation to Madonna or in
Yeah.
relation to Jewish, like Jewish esotericism, which it is to a certain extent, although there is a hermetic Kabbalah. But really, what Kabbalah is at its base, it's an oral-based tradition that is the cosmology. It gives the energies that create the universe. It is kind of a non-religious, because the truth of the matter is that Kabbalah in and of itself doesn't necessarily have any kind of rules or dogma relating to you must do this. It
Hmm.
is an understanding of the way that the universe gets created and the energies that fill up the universe from their archetypal forms. So what we call the sephira or a sephira. A sephira is basically the way that you go from nothing, so blank, what we in Damanhur call the real, and you come into the world of form. And it passes, if you imagine this kind of tree that's passing through these archetypes, and each archetype is being filled and then passing to the next archetype. And when you get to the bottom, you have the whole world of form. So you start at the crown, what's called Keter, and you end up in Malkut, which is the kingdom. And in between, there is a really great understanding of like the different relationships between these archetypes and how it is that you can move through them. So you can move through them in columns, like the column of philosophy, the pillar of philosophy, which gives you a much more sort of philosophical openness, a way for you to just explore, or the column of religion or of severity, which gives you more sort of rules based. So you have justice and you have, different aspects in that. It shows you masculine, feminine type energies. It shows you how things in the paths that connect them, how do they relate and how do you move through them? And very early on for me, I had this attraction to this way of exploring the universe. My mother had always explored so many different kinds of religions. She worked at like a Jewish school. My brothers were technically Baptist. I was Catholic, like all these different pieces because she doesn't like to be pigeonholed. And Kabbalah sort of combined everything. The other thing about it that to me is I'm very much a bridge. I like being able to like to see how two different things actually relate. And so Kabbalah having this more universal archetype way of looking at the world from an energetic and relational perspective means you can use any system on top of it. Like I could
Right.
use, my mother can talk to me about Jesus and I understand the Buddha, or I understand universal unconditional love. Somebody can talk to me about Athena as like the warrior goddess, and I can understand it as the Morrigan, and I can understand what that means from the perspective of a protective mother. Like, it allows me to flow between many different types of religions and philosophies and see that they're all kind of the same situation, because we're all in the same world. We're all in the same world of form. And that has become my guiding star. Like, even though I live in an esoteric society, my spiritual physics layers perfectly onto, and it helps me just connect to a way wider grouping of people and thought processes and schools and such, because I have this foundational base.
Are there any connections or similarities with like the chakra system where you might have your
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you, so you can apply the tree of life, which is the most iconic of the symbols relating to the Kabbalah. You don't need the tree of life, but it's an easier way for representing and seeing how these archetypes and these entities sort of like flow. And you can apply it on the body. And when you apply in the body, the middle pillar becomes the chakras. And so you can see how the chakras, and the chakras in Damanhur are connected to the Adonaiba, which is kind of the energy centers that way. So you see all these different connections. And from the chakras, it's as if you took the tree and you just kind of connected it into that middle pillar, and you see where the chakras are, and then you can work with them in those other also associations and correlations.
you just imagine the world if there was less restricting religions and more of this universal type of kind of freedom where
Yep.
people could be more at peace and connect and work together rather than the restricted kind of ways that, not that we get into too much
No,
in
it's
politics in
it's
this, but
it's another reason why I fell in love with Kabbalah, because, for example, my mother in later years became she became a Baptist, and she chose very consciously for herself, doesn't believe it on anybody else, but because she needed rules, like she needed the pillar of religion. And she and I have fascinating conversations, even though I'm from an esoteric tradition, very broad viewed, because I can map the things that she's telling me as events, as allegories, as stories into other perspectives. And so I agree with you. I mean, if only we could see that it's all the same, and
yeah.
that your rules should help you live a better life, but that it's good to compare them to other things to just better understand kind of the breadth of them. But alas, unfortunately, the world is not there yet. We'll get there. I hope we get there. I keep hoping.
Yes. We get to track 4. This is Rob Thomas,
Hmm.
Lonely No More.
Hmm. So the story behind why I chose this one is kind of, I got to go back to Miami again. So in the 1990s, when I was in college, I ended up doing, so I had gone to Boston because I thought I was going to study something different, come back down to Miami. Turned out that the number one school for the two things that I loved in life at that time, music, mathematics, put them together, you get music engineering. And the number one school in the country was the University of Miami. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going back to Miami. Like, all right.
I'm here.
Exactly. Meh. This is how it is. I had been in Boston and was like trying to go to thinking towards law school, and it wasn't working for me, but that's another story in and of itself. Anyway, so but of course I come in as a sophomore, so my second year, and I am somebody who, I love theoretical, but I need practical. Like, I need that mix. I'm a right brain, left brain person, and I need things to mix in. So I ended up getting my first of 3 internships at Criteria Recording Studios, which was the like massive recording studio in South Florida where things like Layla were recorded, where at the time Yngwie Malmsteen used to record, where Julio
Mhm.
Iglesias used to record. It was a very eclectic place. And I ended up as the second engineer for REM when they recorded the Monster album. And at the time,
Okay.
I actually didn't know REM. So when they were walking around and they were doing the interview, they were like, we don't need anybody who's star-studded. I was like, who am I going to be working with? And they looked around like, hello. And I was like, I don't know who they are. And so but the receptionist there The receptionist of the recording studio was a guy named Adam who had he was a guitarist, and the reason he was in that job was that his mentality was, well, if I'm a receptionist here answering the phones and doing menial things, I get to meet all these people, and maybe once in a while they're going to need somebody to fill in because a guitarist didn't show up or something like that, and I could get into the studio and stuff like that. Turns out that he became, because of something very similar to this, the guitarist for Matchbox 20. Because Matchbox 20 is an Orlando band. They're actually from Orlando. So he
All right.
became their guitarist because of exactly that. They were like looking for a guitarist and da 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 da. So this always stuck in my head. And every time I watched, like, I never really, at the time, didn't really kind of they go for Matchbox 20 when they first were really big. But I would
Hmm.
watch every once in a while and be like, oh, look, Adam, that's so freaking cool, and da da da. Fast forward, I have no idea why. At some point, everything switched, and I really started to get into Matchbox 20. But specifically, I got into Rob Thomas because Rob Thomas is from South Florida. He is, like I said, in Orlando, but he's also lived a lot in the South. And he has a very fascinating history of like abuse and not and like just a horrible home life, and the way he's dealt with it and the his philosophy I really respected. And Lonely No More to me is one of those types of songs that brings out the best in him for me. It's there's the like normal version, and then there's like a remix version that has a much more edgier beat, but the whole concept of like I am just because he was explaining that it's not necessarily just like about a girl, but it's about this concept of I don't really want people in my life who are going to make me feel like I'm alone. Like I don't want, and I talk a lot about being your own ecosystem, right? And like
Hmm.
creating a living ecosystem of people, human and more than human, around you that make you feel, and of having a relationship with yourself that make you realize you're never alone. And so to me, that song represents that. So it's another one of those kind of similar to Numb. It's in that world of the song that I can listen to remember loneliness is because I am not connected. And so what's going on in my life that I don't feel connected? And I'm not going to allow people anymore to come into my life just because, I might think they're cool or because whatever. I only want people in my life where when I'm around them, I feel super connected. I feel super
Yeah.
empowered and charged. And it's a song that just brings that back into life for me.
It's a great story. And I think you're right about you don't want kind of energy vampires taken who just suck your kind of all of the positivity or your kind of energy away. And so bringing people, sometimes it is you have more strength by being, so-called alone, even
Right.
though you don't have to feel like it's the traditional or the tip what it people assume it means
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah, and that's what I love about it because focusing on lonely is not like I'm alone. I spend hours alone. I love being alone, and I live in community. I also love being around people. But loneliness is a state, and it's a state based on the relationships. It always goes back to relationships for me. It's a state of the relationships that you have around you.
We get to track 5. We're going a little bit back into hair metal.
Yes,
Now this
I
is
had to
this
put
is
one in there.
now this is like the Hollywood type of I guess there's a few that you could have picked, but probably they're a little bit more um, glossy and less the sort of obvious bad boys like Motley Crue. So this is
Exactly.
L.A. Guns,
Yep.
Sleazy Come Easy Go.
Yep. So this is a song that relates to my bestest friend when I was in basically high school, but like the beginning of high school. She and I met. She and I met. I call her Psycho. She calls me Jules because that's what we were called back then. We had our names. We were the Sleazy Minx, which were like backup singers for all the hair metal bands in our little made up world. And I met her because we were sitting in French class when I was in 10th grade, and we were bored out of our rocker because our teacher was definitely not one on the great side of French teacher of teachers, period. And I had made a paper airplane, which I still have, that had on it all kinds of Iron Maiden quotes. going back to Iron Maiden, had Iron Maiden symbology and Iron Maiden quotes. And then it also had like a few of like the rock and roll type quotes. And I threw it in the class and it hit somebody in the head and she picked it up and we became best friends. Like I still go and visit her. She lives in like Georgia now, and we still visit each other. And she loved Kelly Nichols, and Kelly Nichols is the bass player for LA Guns. LA Guns was made of Tracy Guns, which was the founder of the band, who used to be Guns N' Roses, right? He was the Guns to the Roses. And so Tracy Guns goes off, forms LA Guns. And one of the first concerts we ever went together as like teenagers, and we went to a lot of concerts in that period of time because it's like, you know, the late 1980s, early 1990s. We saw everybody, John Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, Bad Religion, like everything was LA Guns. And we waited afterwards to meet Kelly Nichols because she had to meet Kelly Nichols. And so here we are, two like teenage girls waiting for this, waiting for them to come out. And we ended up watching that day. I believe that Billy Squire had been on tour with them. I think it was like their opener,
Oh,
and
wow.
he had just gotten fired that day. Like that concert, he got fired at the end of the concert. They went into some kind of fight. So Billy Squire comes out first and was like bitching about something, and then they come out, and we're like, you know, I still have the shirt signed by Kelly Nichols somewhere in my closet. Like, and it became our like our totem song. We would sing it. It was like doing time for you, baby. And it's a two-parter because there's one that does doing time for your baby, and the other one goes, Sleazy come, easy go. And you're like, and that was us in school. We're like, for all the rest of our time together, it still is like a message we can send each other, and everybody, you know, like doing time for your baby, she'll be like, sleazy come, easy go, you know, it's this thing. So it's, and it was all from there. And it turns out that actually Kelly Nichols, who looks as ridiculously American as American P, is actually French, and he lives in France now. He's actually originally was French and had moved to Hollywood to make it in the 80s. And so yeah, so that was why it's like, it's again another one of those songs that just brings up that connection with that person, you know, with my friend Psycho, and who used to tell, she's an
Psycho.
amazing, yeah, she's an amazing artist, and she does like, she used to write the best stories, and she draws, and we had a notebook between a group of friends of ours that like, we had a notebook that we would, rather than writing each other notes, like individual notes, we just had a notebook that we would give to one another, and whomever had it would like write in it and then would pass it to the next person. And I actually met up with another one of our friends from that circle who gave me a new notebook. I was like, oh my goodness. And we live in different countries now, all of us. So we're like, okay, this is going to be interesting to like covered in pictures of like 1980s bands, hair metal bands and such. So yeah, so that's the story of LA Guns and why it made it in there.
We get to track 6. This is now he's local from Miami or from Cuba originally.
You're talking about
Willie.
Shy? Oh, you're talking about Willie. That's right, because we changed it. So yes. So Willie Chirino, El Collar de Clodomiro. So this song, I put it in there because, so Willie Chirino, I'm Cuban. So I'm from Miami. My parents are both Cuban. Like I grew up in both cultures, very, very Cuban. We're what's called Generation Ñ. We're like, you know, the generation that first grew up in Miami. And the number one, well, that's not true. He's probably number two, because number one Cuban artist was, of course, Celia Cruz. And Celia Cruz is like super ridiculously famous. And right after her is Willie Chirino. And Willie Chirino had, you know, he still is. He is, his daughters went to school with me, so I know him. And his, he's still a very, very famous like musician in that Cuban music scene and in that Latin music scene, you might say. And El Collar de Clodomiro, I added it because I wanted something that was like pre everything else that we're talking about. And this is my probably first, I don't know, before I was 10, like 8 years old, 7 years old, like somewhere in that. Yeah, probably around 10 years old type of thing. And it's because actually the song has to be older. Anyways, my mother and I used to dance to this song all the time. Like that was where I learned how to dance salsa. I remember the big, back then stereos were huge. You know, if you remember them, like
Yeah, yeah.
massive. You had the turntable on top, then the shelf, then there was like the amplifier, then the shelf, then like the cassette decks, two of them, of course. Then like that whole layered with all the either tapes or we had an 8 track.
Yeah. I
and
remember
we
8 tracks. We're
and we
aging ourselves on this
exactly
podcast.
we're totally and so we had the record for this song and for this album. And I remember like my mother, I would call her out of her room because the way my house was configured, the stereo, we had a big opened area that I would grab my mother and I would be like, and I would put the record on. And my mother knew, okay, I wanted to dance. And so she, taught me how to dance salsa with this. And that was what we would do. And we would just dance back and forth to Willie Chirino. But specifically, A Collar de Clodomiro was almost always the first song because it was
Hmm.
like it has a very specific rhythm to it that makes it so that, okay, immediately let's start dancing. And then it was funny because that song, and so I used to do a lot of like I danced when I was a kid, so I used to do dance recitals and stuff like that. And this song and Sansara Banda, I created like dance routines to them that I would do whenever there was guests in the house. Like I had to do like, the dance routine back and forth. And so I absolutely, it's like he's had so many, so many, so many great songs, but that one is like anchors in that energy.
Can you still do the dance routine today?
I can do from San Sarabanda, I can do probably the first minute of it because I still
Okay.
remember because it has a very distinct kind of sound. And so
Yeah.
I remember that part of it. I do remember very like vividly the dancing salsa with my mother because she must have done it backwards in order because like technically the woman has one position, the man has the other. And I was like, and it wasn't until years later that I was like, wow, she would do it backwards just to teach me. And like,
Hmm.
and it was just fun. It was so much fun to sit there, and it was a very common thing in our culture to have, the music playing and people getting up and dancing, and thankful for her that she did that with me, that I was able to then, completely do that in my life and be able to dance with other people. But yeah, I was just and the fact that in that period of time I was going to school, like so he was married, he's been married twice. And so he has, I can't remember how many children total, but from the first wife, he has 3 children, of which 2 of them are my brother's ages. And then the one is 1 year younger than I was. So here we are, like listening to this record and this big artist. And then I'm going to school with like his kids and stuff like that. And it was just,
Hmm.
and they were very famous, like singers in and of themselves, all of the family, even the younger daughters who, with the second wife, all were, most of them are musicians and politics, which I think is always interesting too. But yeah, it's like and very much, you have to understand that the Cuban diaspora, like we are very, especially those generations, we're very close, like from the
Hmm.
perspective of ideology and of pride. Like I'm listening right now to a book on the history of what I call Bacardi and you guys call Bacardi, which is a Cuban family. And
Hmm.
I'm in the phase of the Cuban Revolution, and they're a Cuban family, Catalonian roots, who lived in Santiago, which is exactly the trek my father and his family did. Like they were Catalunya from Barcelona to Santiago de Cuba. And so it's like all there was a lot of pride. Even though we were
Yeah.
out of the country, we weren't out of the country because we wanted to be out of the country. We were pushed out of the country, and that was a period of a lot of pride.
Yeah. We get to track 7. This is from a musical called Once Upon a Mattress. I think
Mhm.
this originally came out in the late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
I think Carol Burnett has done a bit in
It
it.
was, yeah, she was the star for the very beginning. She's the one that sang this song.
Yeah. And this song is called Shy. So this is one section of
Mhm.
okay.
Of Once Upon a Mattress. And this I picked it because so when I remember I said I graduated from school, I was doing a bunch of music stuff, and then I go and I work at Real Networks, and I'm still in the music world. And then I go to work at when I left Real Networks, by the time I left Real Networks, I had already kind of moved into more really techie stuff. Like I was working on things that were super, super technical rather than the original sort of player and encoder part that I was in, which was my specialization. And there was reasons for that that were connected to relationship and other stuff that was happening. And so when I left Real Networks and I went to work for a small startup that folded, unfortunately, and then I started to act and sing again because I missed not just working around music, but being in it. And my voice teacher said, "Hey, you should start auditioning and just, have fun. Go do some musical theater and stuff." And one of the songs that I used for my auditions was this one, which has a very, I mean, it's Carol Burnett. It's a very sarcastic song where she basically is wailing to everybody. She's like a princess because it's Once Upon a Mattress, right? The whole idea of the prince and the pea, and like, the idea of I'm a real princess if I can feel the pea under 100 layers of mattresses. And here she is, and she sings this part of like saying, oh my, like I'm, it's really difficult to be, out there because I'm just so shy. But she's saying it in this like exaggerated, I'm in your face type of way. And everybody's looking at her like, what the hell are you talking about? But you can't argue with her because she's a princess. And she's like, but I'm shy and it's so difficult to live my life because I'm shy. And yet, she's in everything. She's in everybody's face and like all this type of stuff. And it was such a, even though I have a degree in music engineering and stuff, I was actually a really late bloomer when it came to music. I didn't grow up playing. I grew up immersed in it, but not playing it. I kind of was self-taught. I had to really work hard to get into the school of music. I had to and my principal instrument was piano, and I had to really, really, really practice because I'm not naturally talented in that way. I'm very talented in other things, but not that. And so this song is very much, first of all, it switches ranges, like, because she goes from like this very low to like, I'm shy, screaming this almost in this very high, in this higher pitch. And I was shy in respect to, I seemed very outgoing. I seemed like somebody who was so there. But when it comes to my musical talents, I was very, very shy. So this was a song that became like, I remember I would walk and I would sing it to myself, or when I needed to, I don't know, especially to get ready for auditions or things like that, or to put myself out there in a more, I still am very, very good at being behind the stage. Being on the stage, I make it look a lot easier than it actually is for me. And so this song was like that. It was, I almost put a different song there that kind of was the same sort of way, but it's become super commercial now. So I was like, okay, like I'm going to go to Shy because that was what started it all anyway. And again, it was pushing me out of my limits vocally. It was not a very common song to play. And so, yeah, that was it. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it happen.
It kind of sounds a bit like slightly over the top or a bit campy, just to kind of, but in that fun. And I can, somebody like Carol Burnett, I mean, ideal, it's perfect to kind of like makes it that.
Exactly. And just being okay with being that kind of getting that kind of attention, that kind of campy sort of, I've never been that way. So it was like, okay, let's try to embrace a different personality of myself.
We get to track 8. This is, I wasn't familiar with this, so this is a new one for me. This is a Ticon. You make me want to drink more. I might have said that phrase before to somebody.
So this is okay. Come out of Real Networks, go into Microsoft. I'm in Microsoft. Remember I told you Wasted Years concert, audition, end up in this world of like, it was kind of the cresting over of the rave turned into intentional dance and intentional community world that I step into. Very performative. I had no idea that there was an underground scene at all. I was so ignorant of these things. And I step headfirst into this scene. Eventually, making the story a little bit shorter, end up being leaving Microsoft to manage an artist in that scene. So a DJ, electronic music producer, and artist, painter. And at the same time, with him and with another person, with him, I found a company to my first company to start producing large scale dance parties. Little did I know how large they would get, but like dance parties. And it was all electronic music. And I just jump into what's called the progressive psytrance scene, which is a very undergroundish sort of scene that I knew nothing about. And it was like, but, you know, total deep dive
Right.
into it. And Ticon, there was lots of, again, songs that I could pick, but Ticon was one of those artists that for us, so we started to bring these artists to do these concerts. Eventually, I started doing my kind of pinnacle show was I did, I don't remember how many we did, 6 or 7 in the Science Museum in Seattle. So the Seattle
Wow.
Science Museum, exactly. It was amazing all night concerts. We went from like 9 p.m. to 4 o'clock in the morning. We had to bring everything in. And at the end, they would only allow me to do it because I was like, there's so many little things you have to take care of because we finish at 4 and by 7 a.m. or 8, we had to be out of there and leave it all clean because at 8 a.m. they open for children. So you can't leave anything behind, like no
No.
alcohol, no nothing behind. Like you have to, and you have to bring in everything, 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 everything. And I did like 4 rooms, 2,000 people. It was just this amazing enterprise after a while. But Ticon in particular, remember I talked about the fact that my circus, the circus I co-owned, had a little bit of a dark side. And we used to do this, we used to do suspensions. So I told you I've always been a little bit off center. So we do suspensions, which are when you pierce people and you suspend them from piercings in their body. I know. I
Oh,
just saw that
oh.
face. I could tell you lots of stories as to why I got into piercing and like doing that, but in the end, and I have like a giant gardenia that's like a scarification that's carved out of my skin and stuff, and again I look kind of, but always a little bit off center. And my we decided that we were going to do an event and we were trying to figure out the music because the event was very particular. We wanted to have this progressive psytrance, which is very much a like I'm gonna dance, like it's psytrance, right? I'm gonna get lost in a trance of music and
Hmm.
dancing, and we wanted to have people that were being suspended and they were being painted while they were suspended. Because I used to do this series
Wow.
that was an art party. Basically, they were called Iosis art parties. They were alchemical transformations through art and music. And we were looking for how to do this. And we had so we had 3 people that were hanging, and one of them was being airbrushed. The other one was being like painted with a brush. I can't remember the third, but they were like hanging there and being painted physically. And on the other side was Ticon, which is of the psytrance, they're one of the most upbeat ones that like really let's just go and dance. And it was, and this is one of those songs because they can be a little campy. Like you make me want to drink more. And it's like watching this, like, it's like you freaking make me want to drink more. What the heck am I watching? And it was a way to because these art parties, these Iosis art parties, and then I had Body Systems dark art parties, were the ability for us to introduce combinations of like mask art and of aerial art and like just really sculpture, paintings. They were just ways that we wanted to bring together music and art in an experience, like the decoration. Because what I loved about producing events was I wanted an event that you walked into the room and you were just transported into something different,
All right.
and that you could just get lost in that music and you could feel super safe to like stomp around and just get into the music and whatever that looked like. And because my thing about the beauty of creating your own parties is that I could create like an event, I could create a space in between. I could create a space anywhere I wanted that I could dance with my eyes closed. Nobody could come near me because it was my party. I could create whatever space I wanted. And so I created a space right between them. like and that was me. I was like lost, closed my eyes and was just dancing, all this type. So that's how Taekwondo made it on the list. Like that period of my life when I was producing these events, that was just so cataclysmic to my transformation, to the idea of taking a long, and I don't do drugs. I live in a community that doesn't do drugs, but I never did them anyway. And it's that scene is kind of known for taking all kinds of different things, which I don't have a problem
Right.
with. It's just not me. And so to me, it was the music. The music was my journey. And so I was
Right.
very acutely connected to like how the arc of the music would take you. And Ticon really always has been one that like lifts you up and like gets you just out there moving and like let it all go.
So we go from Ticon to track 9. This is now, is this a Miami artist?
Yeah,
Okay.
so this is a yeah, Miami artist. He was
Neil
Neil Lara.
Lara?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I will be free. And the reason I included this one is because, remember I told you very practical person when school. So here I am in university. I'm studying music engineering. I'm starting to like get myself out in the world. Neil was actually became a pretty medium-sized Latin rock star in the period when Latin rock was really big. So we're talking about
Hmm.
kind of the mid 1990s when Latin rock was really getting out there. And he was from Miami and he happened to have been, so my brother, my oldest brother is 10 years older than I am, and he was my brother's best friend in high school. And Neil starts to get this following. My brother loses touch with him, kind of, and gets following. And my brother ends up like he goes to his wedding, but then they're not like super, super close. But I am 10 years younger. And so here I am under 21. So I can't go to any of his concerts. I'm in college. I'm hearing back then there was a club in Miami called the Stephen Talk House, and it was like the place for like the music happening. And there was one in Amagansett in upstate New York also. And the Stephen Talk House was like the place. And Nil had lines around the corner to get into his shows.
Wow.
But I wasn't 21. I couldn't get in. So I was about 19 or 20. And I go to my brother. I was at my brother's house and I was like, hey, can you talk to Nil and see if he can get me into one of his shows? You know, I also wanted to see it from a professional perspective. Like I was studying sound. I loved doing sound, like live sound, and
Hmm.
such. And so I don't remember how it happened, but Nil's like, hey, I need a merch person for tonight. Do you want to come and sell some merch? And that way you can come in and be part of the show. And I was like, hell yeah. Anyways, I became so throughout my next 3 years of college and probably a few months after I graduated, I became his merch person, the person who was responsible for his merch. I cannot even tell you how much money this man made from his merch because he was very smart. Like he had this shirt with his feet because he was always dancing and he had this cuatro. He was very Cuban. He still is a friend of mine. Like every time I go to Miami, I always go and I always bump into Nil whenever I go to a show somewhere in Miami. And at the time I Will Be Free was like his big that was the his album, his first album that he put out, which was a 4-track album, and I Will Be Free was the title of it. And it's just this, it's all about this the Cuban struggle of like feeling free. He had another one called Bonifacio. One of the shows he had like one of the kind of life rafts that Cubans would make to get out of the country. So which I had a cousin that had sewed together raincoats in order to make himself a boat, left
Hmm.
his wife and child behind in order to try to make it to the United States, had spent 3 years in between Panama and Guantanamo Bay before he was ever able to make it onto American soil. And it took him, I don't
Wow.
remember how many years from there to finally get his wife and children to be able to come over. So the struggle back then of like people leaving the country, you know, of trying to make it to the United States, of everything that was happening in Cuba was very strong. And Nil embodied that. And so we were, you know, for me as his merch person, I was able to always have this like clear scene of everybody in the club and to watch how this music was like bringing together our generation, which was this Enya, right? This like we are the beauty of Miami is that none of us ever had to give up everything that it meant to be Cuban, Jose Marti and you know Cuban food and Cuban holidays and all this stuff. And at the same time, we were 100% American as well. Thanksgiving and you know, so we could have Nochebuena and Christmas Eve, and we could have you know Año Viejo and New Year. Like we could have it
Yeah.
all, and it was just his
It wasn't
music.
choosing one or the other.
No, which so many you know I discovered, of course, as I got older, as I would go out to visit friends of mine, Mexican friends or people of other descent, Italians and stuff. They lost everything. They lost culture. They lost language. They only kept this sort of stereotypical piece where we got to still keep it all. We had the language, you know, we have the expressions, we have that piece. It's a little bit frozen in time, but we're still there and we still have it. And that's such a privilege. And Nil embodied that. He ended up recording an album with EMI, which was horrible because he had lost a lot of his creative rights. He didn't know how to sign contracts. I mean, we've talked about this, he and I and other people from the group. A lot of people in that area, in that period of time, who I was going to school with have become really famous. I just had a friend of mine who had a band also at that time who I went to school with, and I would like go to all their shows, who was just the bass player for like the Ozzy Osbourne tribute to the Video Music Awards. My
Hmm.
other friend is the drummer for Shakira. Like these people all were going on. I've had so many of musicians from that period of time, and Nil still plays, but he stayed true. He chose after the whole debacle with EMI, he tried again and to get another record deal. He did kind of was able to do some stuff, but then he just wanted to make music. He just wanted to make his
Yeah.
music, and kind of like has always just been a musician in Miami, but never tried to kind of like become big again. That was like, I'm done with that part of my life. And but I Will Be Free was really about, like, it's funny, as I say all these titles, the music is, kicking in my head. And that was really his battle cry of like, I'm going to be free, and I'm going to be free of everything. I'm going to be free of the regime, the Castro regime. I'm going to be free of like all the other stuff. I mean, and so yeah, so that's why I included it, because it was also a really big opportunity for me to get into the music scene in an adult way, like, to really step into. I met so many people. There are so many contacts that I still, you know, relationships with. Back then it was like groups like Saigon Kick, and then people like Marilyn Manson, right? People forget Marilyn Manson's from Miami, man. It was called Marilyn Manson and the Spooky Kids. Like, I remember going to see Brian play shows when he was just trying to make it big, Brian Warner, and he became Marilyn Manson. So it was really a rich period, and thanks to Nil giving me the opportunity to get in that back door. And then by that point, I was grandfathered into all kinds of stuff. I was able to really be in the heart of all of that in my own way, in my backstage sort of supportive way, which is what I've always loved doing.
Yeah. We get to track 10. This is a virtual interspecies ensemble, and this is called Sonic Bliss. So this is actually music made with plants.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So this track was born from COVID, to be honest. Like, it was COVID time, and I was talking to, so here I am using a lot of plant music, because plant music also, especially the plant I was working with at the time, Spider Plant, we were in the middle, I was right before COVID hit, we were in the middle of doing a study into the effects of plant music on human health. So looking at how is it that music affects the human health, because we have lots and lots of like anecdotal data. Now there's a little bit more hard data, but at the time, lots of anecdotal data over the years about improvements to health, and which correlates to many of the findings of how plants help with accelerated healing, and how people are using plants, people are working with plants in hospitals and in other kinds of scenarios. So it made perfect sense. So here we are, it's COVID, we're kind of in lockdown. I'm talking to a bunch of different musicians, and Spider Plant, my plant partner, is telling me, "Hey, why don't we create this like song?" I had a engineer that I was working with. I had another friend of mine who has created a multi-track music of the plants device, and we were like, "Why don't we create some kind of like interspecies type of music?" So I recorded a bass track with Spider Plant. So Spider Plant, on like this bells sound, created this track, and then I started to contact some of these musicians. So my friend Tritone records Coco the Coconut that he was working with at the time, and
Mhm.
has this kind of like creates a track over the track that I have. I contact Simone Vitale, who's this beautiful keyboard player who had been making a lot of plant music, really gorgeous stuff. He is a music therapist and has a sound healer and all these different aspects. And he records a track himself And he has a yucca plant that records also. So here we have like, now we have spider plant, we have Coco the coconut, we have yucca, who's playing like a choir sound, and we have Simone who's playing keyboards. And then I contact this another musician, a guitarist in the United States. So Simone is Italian, but he was living in New Zealand at the time. Tritone is Domin-Hurrian, but he's Danish. And then I contact Clive Wright, who is in the United States, who's another guitarist and is like another person who just creates really cool music with plants. And he records Kalanchoe, who and he record, like they record 2 tracks together again. And then I reached out to a friend of mine, Annika Cleo, who is a gorgeous vocalist from Finland, who I had previously done 2 concerts with in Finland. When I was presenting in Finland, I had done multiple concerts with her. So, here we are, all of us recording these tracks. And then I handed them over to this amazing engineer, Krishna Fani, who I was talking to at the time, and was like, okay, let's create a song. Can you do it? And he was listening to all of this. He's like, hell yeah. So we created this beautiful interspecies ensemble piece that we called Sonic Bliss, that it was just made for our fun. So we just published it on like SoundCloud and Instagram and Insight Timer. So you can't find it on Spotify because we never produced it for anybody else. It was just really for us. But I wanted to include this because it really is the culmination of probably, if it wasn't for all of my history with music in general, everything that we've just talked about up until now, this track probably wouldn't have even existed, because
Right.
I had to, have the background in my engineering to understand how it could be engineered. I had to understand and appreciate, all of these different styles of music coming together. It was just so many pieces that like it felt like such a healing. And we put it out specifically because we wanted people to just listen to it for its healing properties. So it's very kind of soft, it's connected, and to show, because, back then, I think I had watched like Hamilton cast members, because I think Disney Plus had put out Hamilton during the whole pandemic, because they wanted people to like have something to watch. And then there was lots of like virtual concerts that were happening over Zoom and stuff. So I think that
Yeah.
was probably another piece of the inspiration. And I was like, but we can do this with plants. And so here we are. We created this like 7-part concert, track that brings together the human and the more than human world into this one piece.
How many of the parts of the 7 are plant? 4?
There are spider plant, Coco the coconut, yucca, and kalanchoe. So four
4. Okay.
plants and 3 humans.
3 humans.
Yeah.
It actually was very beautiful. That just, listening to it and hearing the sounds and the music that was created, plus having Annika's voice integrated into that, it was really incredible.
Yeah. I was so, as we were listening to it come across, and I was like, oh my God, this is so gorgeous. I and also so touching, like you could tell. And that was the reason why I did handpick each one of these people on purpose, like each one of these
Mhm.
human as well as plants. Like we had long conversations from the perspective of, we really wanted something that was not just, let me just throw a track down, but like that's why Spider Plant was the base. Like I didn't use a human as the base. I used, like, we
Yeah.
wanted the base to be a plant that had that direction. And Spider Plant already had been kind of more the healing focus. That was really, Spider Plant was not a traditional musician in the sense of like, I'm going to make music for music. I want to make music for healing perspectives. And so I think you feel also that connection between the different plants and the different humans, that in a different way, thankfully, from that. And that really came across.
Do you see that plant music will be able to be more accessible, especially for healing and for health, to get people interconnected with themselves, but also with nature?
I do actually. So now, back then, there was really, the music of the plants was the beginning of the devices. There are now more devices that exist out there. The difference between the music of the plants device is because it was developed here in Damanhur, because it was developed as from a community perspective, it really intends always to be the most accurate is, I don't know the right word, but like the opportunity to the plant to represent themselves as much as possible. And I think that that obviously means that the music is not what we're expecting. It's not your traditional, like, it doesn't have your traditional rhythms. It doesn't have your traditional melodies. If you're a jazzer, you might hear like Mixolydian and Lydian type scales mixed in there because for whatever reason, plants create in those ways. And I have theories as to why. There are many different aspects that it, to me, what I find is that people who do not like this music are those that are most disconnected. They really struggle with connecting to the natural side of themselves as well as to
Yeah.
nature outside of themselves. And so I think that this music definitely has an opportunity to help people, kind of like it did for me, is like this reawakening of, oh my goodness, plants are actually living beings, and oh my goodness, like I am a being of nature, and therefore there's like an original wound, a trauma that we're all struggling from that sits in there that we have not been able to, that we haven't recognized, that is the wound of disconnection. The fact that
Yeah.
we are living in this world around us as if we're separate from it rather than looking at ourselves. And I know how much that's changed me, how much it's changed my clients, how much it's how I see people as they start to reconnect and understand in an embodied way how much their lives change. It kind of goes back to the whole lonely no more piece that we were talking about. This
Yeah.
epidemic that we have of disconnection and of loneliness changes when you recognize, without having to like do things, it changes when you recognize yourself as a being of nature.
Tigrilla, it's been an honor for you to share your songs and the 10 tracks, but also to kind of bring plant music and the plant world into the mix for everybody. I think there's a lot to learn still, and I think I'm really excited to kind of hear more and to grow. I know I'll share some of the links with with people so they can find you, but is there anything particular that, or the best way people can contact you?
Yeah, luckily I'm pretty easy. Having an unusual name, Tigrilla Gardenia, means you can find me at Tigrilla Gardenia, all one word, everywhere. .com, at Instagram, at Facebook, at YouTube, at LinkedIn. It's all there. And I also have a podcast called Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. And it's really these types of conversations, right? Like getting into that heart of connection through artistry, through, because I really believe that the natural world thinks so differently from the conditioned responses that we as humans have, that the best way to get back into that connection is through the arts, through
Yeah.
music, through sculpture, because it allows us to step out of the world of quote unquote reality and to instead feel our way through it. So I do a lot of different parts with plant music, but also with the arts in general to help us, and talk to many different types of artists that are bringing a new paradigm into being of co-creation, of collaboration.
I think that artists probably could learn a lot from the plant sounds and the music that plants are making. I think it would actually give them more inspiration as well.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think that that's, you asked me, do I feel like it's coming into the in mainstream? It's going to take a while because it is so different in the way that it sounds. And yet those that are doing it, and I think that today there's still, because plants are not reproducible, you can't like train a plant right now to play the same song over and over again in a concert. So it's a different kind of experience to listen to an interspecies concert. And also, it's very easy at the beginning to go super slow. So it's mostly down tempo music that you hear. And that
Mm.
makes sense, but it's going to take us a while before we can get into other forms of experiential music that I've seen it, I've heard it, but it's still rare because it requires a form of letting go of your musical training and while still being that trained musician and yet letting go of all of that training in order to enter into a relationship with another being that you might have never had a conversation with before.
Yeah. Tigria, thank you so much. As always, I wish you to be kind, be humble, and be love. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Thank you.
his sports jacket.